Hello everyone, my name is Jorge Guadamus. I am an environmental health specialist and I'm here with the Arkansas Department of Health. I want to thank the representatives of Saline County for giving me the opportunity to talk to you, the residents of Saline County, about dioxin exposure. So today I want to address some of your concerns regarding dioxin exposure. Dioxin is definitely concerning because it can stay in the environment for long periods of time, and it is very highly toxic. However, the amount of dioxin an individual is exposed to is what determines the toxicity of dioxin, and Saline County is a low-risk area of dioxin exposure, and I will definitely get into detail as to why that is, and we'll also talk about what dioxin is. As I mentioned before, we will be talking about dioxins today. I have provided an outline of what we will see and talk about today. So we will begin with what dioxins are. We are also going to look at sources of dioxin and where they may come from. We will look at common routes of exposures and ways we can be exposed to dioxin here in saline. We're also going to be looking at risk factors, or factors that can increase our chances of diseases associated with dioxin. We will also look at the effects of dioxin on health and the impact it may have on us. We'll also look at dioxins in Saline County. We'll see if there should be a cause for concern. And lastly, we'll look at prevention and reduction of dioxin exposure so we can limit our exposure to dioxins here. So let's talk about what dioxins are. Dioxins are environmental pollutants that are byproducts of human activities. Dioxins are mainly byproducts of industrial processes, but they can also result from natural processes. They belong to a group known as the Dirty Dozen, which are persistent organic pollutants. They are highly toxic chemicals that don't break down easily, and because of this, they are a cause of concern. Dioxins are a family of chemicals found in different forms, such as PCDFs, PCBs, and PCDDs. Dioxins are also very stable chemicals. Once they enter the body, they are absorbed by fat tissue, and then they are stored within the body. Now let's look at some sources of dioxin. Where can dioxin come from? As I mentioned before, dioxin is a byproduct of some human activity. Human activities that create dioxin include burning fuels, burning coal, burning wood, and burning of household trash. Dioxins are also an unwanted byproduct of some industrial processes. These processes include smelting, manufacturing of pesticides and herbicides, bleaching of paper pulp, and the worst culprit, which is uncontrolled waste incinerators. And this is mostly due to the incomplete burning of solid waste and hospital waste. Natural processes also create dioxins, processes such as volcano eruptions and forest fires, but we rarely see those here in Saline County. How can we be exposed to dioxins? Common routes of exposure include ingestion. Dioxins are found throughout the world in the environment and they accumulate within the food chain. They accumulate mainly within fatty tissues of animals. So, eating meat, dairy products, fish, and shellfish places us at risk for dioxin exposure. Water that has been contaminated by the byproducts of industrial processes also places us at risk for dioxin exposure. Another common route of exposure is through inhalation. Cigarette smoke and secondhand smoke contain dioxins, and breathing in the smoke can bring dioxins into our bodies. Fuel emissions and vehicle exhaust also contain dioxins, and when they're breathed in, they can bring dioxins within our bodies that are then stored into our fat. Dioxins can also be exposed through dermal contact. Now, this is the least common route of exposure, but we can still be exposed to dioxins through this way. We'll talk about the effects of dioxin on humans and the negative impacts it may have on our health. Let's begin with some of the acute effects, which are some of the effects that are short-term but seen first or almost immediately. These acute effects include chloracne, patchy darkening of the skin, and some altered liver function. And chloracne is an acne-like eruption of blackheads, cysts, and pustules. And the best example we have of chloracne is of Viktor Yushchenko, the Ukrainian opposition leader pictured to the right. Now in the picture on his left side of his face, that is his face before he was poisoned with dioxin. And on the right side, we can see how the dioxin has affected his skin after he was poisoned. Now let's talk about some of the chronic effects. Dioxin is a hormone disruptor, so it will disrupt hormone function within our bodies. It can also cause some liver damage. And it will also cause some reproductive and mental health problems in children. It can also damage our immune system, and it can ultimately cause cancer. As we saw, dioxin exposure can have negative impacts to our health. Now let's take a look at some risk factors, or factors that can increase our chances of contracting disease due to dioxin exposure. So first off, we have high meat and fish consumption. As I mentioned before, dioxins tend to accumulate in the food chain. The dioxins are absorbed into the fatty tissue of animals and fatty tissues of our bodies. So consuming fatty animal products such as meat, dairy products, fish, and shellfish can increase our chances of coming into contact with dioxin and increasing our chances of disease. If you're a smoker, you're also increased chance due to the dioxins within the cigarettes. Burning trash also increases our chances of disease, because whenever we burn trash or wood or twigs or leaves, we are releasing dioxin into the air that we are inhaling. Breastfeeding. Newborn babies are at risk of dioxin exposure from breastfeeding. However, many studies suggest that breastfeeding and the benefits of breastfeeding outweigh any kind of risks associated with dioxin exposure. Occupational exposure. People working in paper mills, manufacturing of pesticides and herbicides are also at an increased risk due to the byproducts of these industrial processes. Veterans of the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War, something called Agent Orange, which was a tactical herbicide, was used by the U.S. military, and it was sprayed. About millions of gallons were sprayed on trees and vegetation during the war, and veterans who were exposed are definitely at risk for any kind of diseases associated with dioxins. So far we've talked about dioxins, what they are, risk factors, and some health effects that they may cause. Now we're going to talk about dioxin in Saline County, which is why we're here today. So, there's normal background exposure to dioxins. Dioxins are pretty much everywhere, and we all have some sort of amount of dioxins within our bodies, but it is not enough to cause any kind of damaging effects. Current exposures to dioxins are largely from past releases of industrial processes or the byproducts of many human activities. And most exposure is from animal product intake. So about 95 to 90% of intake for typical adults is through ingestion of animal fats or animal fat containing products such as dairy, meat, fatty meat, fish, shellfish, things of that nature. And regulations from the EPA, FDA, and the World Health organizations have also helped to reduce dioxin within saline and other parts of the United States and international areas as well. So, regulations such as the Clean Air Act has definitely limited the amount of dioxins being released into the air. The Toxic Substances Control Act, which has led to industrial processes or manufacturing companies to report to the EPA if any release of chemicals can present any kind of substantial risk of injury to the people. The Safe Drinking Water Act has also helped regulate contaminants in drinking water and dioxin within the water, so that has definitely helped reduce dioxin within Saline County as well as the rest of the United States. All of these regulations and these agencies have helped reduce dioxin intake. The EPA constantly monitors dioxin within the environment. The Food and Drug Administration checks for dioxins within our foods and the animal products that we do eat. And the World Health Organization focuses on more international areas where dioxin may be an issue. Although Saline County and most parts of the United States are low risk for dioxin exposure, there's still some other things that we can definitely do to decrease our exposure to dioxins even more. So, right now I will talk about some prevention and reduction methods that we can do ourselves to reduce dioxin exposure. So, let's begin with a balanced diet. Um, you've heard me talk about the animal fat and animal products that contain fat because dioxin is absorbed into these fatty tissues. So, having a balanced diet can definitely help reduce exposure to dioxins. Trimming fat for meat and consumption of low fat dairy products can definitely help reduce exposure to dioxin from these animal products. Including adequate amounts of fruits and vegetables and cereals can also help. Avoid smoking and secondhand smoke. Again, cigarettes do contain dioxin, and coming into contact or breathing in the smoke can definitely increase our exposure to dioxin. So avoiding smoking and secondhand smoke can definitely reduce some of that exposure. We can also avoid burning wood or trash. I'm sure it may be something simple, but we sometimes never think about these things, but avoiding burning wood or trash can definitely help reduce our exposure to dioxins. Pesticides. Whenever we're handling pesticides, we must do so with care. Pesticides and herbicides, they have to be handled with care. They do contain dioxins within, and any contact with it can expose us to dioxin. So please handle these with care. So let's summarize what we learned today. Today we talked about dioxins, what they are, common routes of exposure, and some risk factors. We also talked about health effects from dioxins. Now there is a low rate of dioxin exposure in Saline County. This is mostly due to regulations. Regulations from the EPA and the FDA have helped decrease our exposure to dioxins. Regulations such as the Clean Air Act, the Toxic Substances Control Act, and the Safe Drinking Water Act. EPA monitoring of the environment and FDA monitoring of foods has also helped reduce our exposure to dioxin. Now, remember, some common routes of exposure are through ingestion, and this is from eating fatty animal products. 90 to 95% of our dioxin intake is from eating these fatty animal products. Inhalation, another method or common route of exposure, from cigarette smoke or from burning trash. And the least common route of exposure is through dermal contact, which is direct contact of the chemical with our skin. Exposure can be prevented. It can be prevented through a balanced diet, cutting the fat off the meats, eating more fruits and vegetables, and avoiding smoke and the smoke from burning trash. I have included these references here for your information. If you would like to read more about dioxin and dioxin exposure, feel free to follow the links provided here. And I would like to open up the floor to any questions that you may have. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me. If you require any additional information, add to my email or my phone number. You can also reach me at the Arkansas Department of Health at 501-661-2171 at the Office of Environmental Health. I'm also including an additional source for the EPA if you want to read, and I am including their phone number for their office in Dallas if you wish to contact them. Thank you very much.